Good evening and welcome to World Today, your daily window to the world. I'm Amritpal Singh. On the show tonight, we'll talk about what transpired at the Delhi Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan, in which 8 countries participated. But first up, the headlines we're tracking at this hour. The third Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan, held in New Delhi, discusses the situation in Afghanistan, pays special attention to the current political situation in Afghanistan and the threats arising from terrorism, radicalization and drug trafficking, as well as the need for humanitarian assistance. NSA Ajit Doval says Afghanistan has implications for all, calls for united approach by all countries. All participating NSAs call on Prime Minister Modi. President Ramnath Kovind confers the honorary rank of General of the Indian Army on Army Chief of Nepal, General Prabhuram Sharma, in a special ceremony at Rashtrapati Bhavan. General Naravane conferred the same honor by Nepal in 2020. Trouble for former US President Donald Trump. US judge allows Congressional Committee probing Capitol Hill violence to examine some White House records. Trump supporters had stormed the Capitol building on the 6th of January ahead of President Joe Biden's election victory. Extreme cold wave sweeps across many parts of China, bringing heavy snowfall and plunging temperatures. China's Meteorological Administration warns negative impact on the country's energy supply, agriculture and transport infrastructure. BCCI announces Indian squad for the upcoming 3-match 2020 International Series against New Zealand. Rohit Sharma named as captain and KL Rahul appointed as vice captain of the 16-member squad. So those were the headlines, and let's begin with the big news. The third Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan was held in New Delhi in an expanded format. The National Security Advisors of India, Iran, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan participated in the meeting. The participants discussed the evolving situation in Afghanistan, especially the security situation and its regional and global ramifications. The sides paid special attention to the current political situation in Afghanistan and the threats arising from terrorism, radicalization and drug trafficking, as well as the need for humanitarian assistance. During the meeting, the National Security Advisors reiterated strong support for a peaceful, secure and stable Afghanistan, while emphasizing emphasizing respect for sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity and non-interference in internal affairs of Afghanistan. They also expressed deep concern over the suffering of the people of Afghanistan arising from the security situation there. They emphasized Afghanistan's territory should not be used for sheltering, training, planning or financing any terrorist acts. They also condemned in the strongest terms all terrorist activities and reaffirmed their commitment to combat terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, including financing and dismantling of terrorist infrastructure and countering radicalization, to ensure that Afghanistan would never become a safe haven for global terrorism. The NSAs also called for collective cooperation against the menace of radicalization, extremism, separatism and drug trafficking in the region. They stressed the need for forming an open and truly inclusive government that represents the will of all the people of Afghanistan and has the representation from all sections of their society. including major ethno-political forces in the country. And inclusion of all sections of society in the administrative and political structure, which is imperative for successful national reconciliation process in the country. Recalling the relevant UN resolutions on Afghanistan, the participants noted that United Nations has a central role to play in Afghanistan and that its continued presence in the country must be preserved. This is what the Delhi Declaration after the summit said, emphasizing the importance of ensuring the fundamental rights of women, children and minority communities are not violated. They also expressed concern over the deteriorating socio-economic and humanitarian situation in Afghanistan and underlined the need to provide urgent humanitarian assistance to the people of Afghanistan. They also reiterated that humanitarian assistance should be provided in an unimpeded, direct and assured manner to Afghanistan, and that the assistance is distributed within the country in a non-discriminatory manner across all sections of Afghan society. They reiterated the commitment to provide assistance to Afghanistan to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So this formed the crux of the Delhi Declaration, which was adopted today at the 3rd Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan, which was held in New Delhi and hosted by India. And earlier in his opening remarks, the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval stressed on close consultations, greater cooperation and interaction among regional countries.
We all have been keenly watching the developments in that country. These have important implications not only for the people of Afghanistan, but also for its neighbors and the region. This is the time for close consultations amongst us, greater cooperation and interaction and coordination among the regional countries. I am confident that our deliberations will be productive, useful, and will contribute to help the people of Afghanistan and enhance our collective security.
Now, this was a sentiment echoed by other participating national security advisors. Nasrullah Mahmoud Zoda, the Secretary of the Security Council of Tajikistan, said that the current situation in Afghanistan creates extra risk and possibilities for drug trafficking and terrorism. The situation on the Tajik-Afghan borders remains complicated, he said.
You can understand why we are concerned as we have a long border with Afghanistan, and of course the current situation creates extra risk and possibility for growth of drug trafficking, terrorism and criminality. The situation on the Tajik and Afghan border remains complicated, and we as the neighboring country are ready to participate in all programs that can help to the people of Afghanistan.
And Rear Admiral Ali Shamkhani, the Secretary of the National Security Council of Iran, raised the issue of migration, refugees in Afghanistan. He stressed on the finding a solution with the formation of an inclusive government and participation of all ethnic groups.
Basically, in Afghanistan, you have just crisis, the crisis of migration and refugees. And the solution comes only through the formation of an inclusive government with the participation of all ethnic groups, and therefore we hope we would be able to determine who would be the fourth, where and who would host the fourth round, and also we would be able to come up with ideas with what mechanism we can resolve the issues in Afghanistan.
And Russia's NSA Nikola Patrushev, participating in the Delhi dialogue, said that such multilateral meetings help in discussing issues linked to the development situation in Afghanistan. counter challenges and threat emanating from the country and establish long-lasting peace in the country.
All these events are surely important. We are also convinced that such dialogue mechanisms should not duplicate the work of each other, but rather complement each other. From my point of view, I would presume that the Moscow format of consultations on Afghanistan retains its important potential because it lets us coordinate efforts to help Afghanistan to settle the Afghani issue, considering the new political environment in that country.
And later the visiting NSAs along with NSA Ajit Doval called on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The NSAs of these visiting 7 countries, including the 5 Central Asian countries and Russia and Iran, called on the Prime Minister. The NSAs from these countries briefed the Prime Minister about their concerns and what transpired at the Delhi summit or the Delhi Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan. Oh. And let's try and understand visually that what really is this Delhi Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan. Well, India has hosted this regional security dialogue in Delhi. This is the 3rd regional security dialogue which discussed the ongoing situation in Afghanistan, and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval chaired this dialogue. And this was, as I said, primarily about the situation evolving in Afghanistan and the implications and the ramifications of that. The NSAs of 7 countries were in attendance. Basically, it was Iran, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, and of course India was hosting this. So 8 countries participated in the Delhi Regional Security Dialogue. Pakistan and China were invited, though they did not attend this dialogue. Iran had earlier hosted such a dialogue in 2018 and 2019, but that was pre-Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. So this dialogue is happening at a time when Taliban is in control, and that has put a different spin on things. So it was discussed at length that what the current regime means there, what it means for the people of Afghanistan and also for the world and the region. Okay, now the Delhi Regional Security Dialogue, let's look at what was on the agenda. Adopting a common approach or forging a consensus in confronting the threat of terrorism from the Afghan soil, radicalization, drug trafficking and illicit flow of arms, cross-border movement of people or migration that is happening was also a key concern. The threat emanating from military weapons left behind by US and NATO forces falling into the hands of terrorists, that was another key point of discussion. The humanitarian crisis or the catastrophe evolving in Afghanistan and how to arrest it, assistance and aid distribution was also discussed, and one saw that being reflected in the Delhi Declaration that was adopted, where the 2 sides discussed this and came out with the Delhi Declaration. And to talk more about that, I am joined by Major General Dhruv C. Katoch. He is retired from the Indian Army and is currently the director of the India Foundation. He joins us for more on that. General Kantoch, welcome to the show and many thanks for joining us. You must have looked at the Delhi Declaration. What do you think, what do you make of it? What do you think was significant that was achieved during this day-long security dialogue?
Thank you, Amrit Patri. I think this was very, very significant because for a very long time, Pakistan has intended to keep India out of the Afghanistan equation, whereas it was India over the last 20 years which has spent over $3 billion in reconstructing Afghanistan, and we were the only country which provided that sort of aid. Now what has happened is that when India took this initiative, I think the initiative has come back to India because two countries abstained, that is true, both Pakistan and China abstained. But all the other regional powers, you see, we are talking about two major blocks here, Iran on the west and Russia and the 5 Central Asian republics combined together, we can call it as one block. Now, both these two blocks, that means these 7 countries, actually were with India. And I think every single concern which India had has been discussed in this particular conference. And amongst these regional neighbors, there has been an agreement. And that agreement is basically on the lines of what India had suggested. Now, obviously, there is a commonality of interest as far as India, the 5 Central Asian republics, Russia, and Iran is concerned. When we look at Russia, they really have a very serious concern about the spread of radicalization and terrorism to the Central Asian republics in the initial stages, and from there on to the Muslim populated areas within Russia. For Iran, the threat is much more of what is happening to the Hazara population and the way they are being mistreated in Afghanistan, and the way the Taliban has actually set out killing the Hazaras. Now, this may lead to a situation, a large number of Hazaras have already fled to Iran, but it may, this flood, it may become a huge tide, which Iran may find difficult to handle, and they don't want any of those complications there. As far as India is concerned, we have our concerns of the terrorist groups operating within Afghanistan being used against India. We have the threat of radicalization spreading from Afghanistan onto India. And all the concerned countries have this combined problem of drug usage. So when we are looking at it holistically, I think all these concerns have been talked about in this particular dialogue, and an agreement has been reached that we should work together to curb the spread. Now, honestly speaking, China should have joined in because China too has similar concerns. They have concerns about the Uyghurs within Afghanistan, and the Taliban, though it is in power, is not in a position to influence the terrorist groups or the other groups which are operating within Afghanistan, including the Islamic State. So the Taliban does not exercise any control over the ETIM, and that will remain China's concern. So China should have actually joined in, but they have not done so because of Pakistan. Pakistan, I think, will be a loser as far as this particular conference is concerned, because Pakistan wants to treat Afghanistan as its personal backyard. They want to keep Pakistan poor. They want to keep Pakistan underdeveloped so that they can maintain their control and hold over the state polity. Now, I think that is something which they will find increasingly difficult to do with the other regional countries getting together. The last point, of course, is regarding aid to Afghanistan. I have always maintained that giving aid will be counterproductive unless we channel it ourselves. So giving aid to the Afghanistan, the Taliban there will be counterproductive. So, beg your pardon. So very rightly, the 8 countries have agreed, absolutely agreed, that this aid has to be directed through an independent agency, and it has to go to all these stakeholders. That means every single person within Afghanistan must be an equal recipient of that aid, which is why it has to be done independently. So I think as far as India is concerned, all our concerns have been met. To a very large extent, this also meets the concerns of countries like the United States and Europe. So we find the whole world in effect is on one side, and we have Pakistan and China on the other. And that is the way the situation is panning out. Amritpalji.
Katoch, I have the Delhi Declaration in my hand. The concerns that you say India had were reflected in today's security dialogue. They find a mention also in the Delhi Declaration, but one does not see any concrete commitment or a roadmap on how to go about addressing these issues, be it containing terrorism, be it the issue of humanitarian assistance and things like that. Yes, it's been reiterated, for example, on humanitarian assistance, the language is reiterated that humanitarian assistance should be provided in an unimpeded, direct and assured manner to Afghanistan, and that the assistance is distributed within the country in a non-discriminatory manner across all sections of Afghan society. Now my question, sir, is that the concerns that these countries that who gathered today, all the NSAs of these 8 countries who gathered today, and as you rightly say of China also, on export of radical ideology, on terrorism, remain and are common. But are the approaches to deal with the situation, to how to go about finding a solution to that, is there congruence of approach also amongst these at least 8 countries who participated in the Delhi security dialogue?
I beg your pardon. When I look at the approach part of it, I think ultimately it is the Afghan Taliban which has to deliver. That is one. Because of Pakistan's undue influence over the Taliban, can we pressurize Pakistan to go that course? Now, I want to examine this in a slightly different light. When I'm looking at the Taliban's capability to go in for a government which is inclusive and to give rights to women, etc., which has been demanded. Now, they face a problem. As of now, there are about 70,000 Taliban fighters. That is, of course, part of the government now. But there are about 2,000 people who are the fighters from the Islamic State. Now, Pakistan, the Taliban's concern is if they start becoming moderate, then a very large number of their ground supporters will drift to the Islamic State. And once they drift to the Islamic State, their problems will increase. So they are finding themselves hemmed in by 2 different sets of requirements. One is to conform to what the regional neighbors have asked of them. That is to have an inclusive government, to have gender-based justice, and to give equal representation to all the stakeholders within Afghanistan. But should they do so, they are going to face internal turmoil, and I do not think they are going to take that path. So we are looking at that internal turmoil increasing till such a point that perhaps foreign interference may actually be required. We may actually slip into civil war. The second aspect is, as far as the aid is concerned, you see, unless the Afghanistan government agrees to these terms, that aid cannot be given. So the suffering will take place within the people of Afghanistan. Now people may say, why should the Afghan people suffer? Give it to the Taliban government. But if you give it to the Taliban government, it is only their people who will get that aid, and the people who are suffering actually will still not receive it. So it still won't serve the purpose. There are no easy solutions. For the last 20 years, a solution has eluded them.
Yes, Jalal Sahab, that's what I wanted to come to. One understands the dilemma of the world, including of the regional players who gathered in Delhi today, and that's why Taliban was not invited, because none of them recognizes Taliban, is shying away from giving legitimacy to the Taliban government because they don't measure up to the standards of a modern society about giving representation to the various ethnic minorities there, to women. Their ideas about running the country are very different from what a egalitarian fair play society would demand, and that is why the dilemma. But how do you ensure what you pledge at the Delhi Declaration, at the Delhi dialogue? How do you ensure that that will be implemented unless you get the Taliban on board. It's a typical dilemma that you exist with and which still exists, that how do you reach the Afghan people given their suffering, given their mass starvation that is facing Afghanistan and the Afghan people, by bypassing the Taliban?
No, that I think is going to remain a dilemma. It's but the important point is at least all the regional countries have agreed to a common approach. Earlier, even that was not there. So we have now and these are the most important neighbors. You take away Pakistan and China because Pakistan has different interests. Had it not been for Pakistan's interest, even China would have come on board. So Pakistan has got different interests, and their interest is simply to control Afghanistan. So as a first step, we have got an agreement. Okay, let us do this. Now, if we didn't have that step, then we can't even go to the next step. So the next step will take time. I think one of the things which may have to be done is for the United States and Europe to put pressure on Pakistan. Now, if you pressurize Pakistan adequately, their military will back off. And if their military backs off, then the Taliban will be more amenable to implementing, in a sense, what was the Doha Accord of 29 February 2020. Now, if that gets implemented, then obviously everything becomes okay, and everybody will recognize the government. But Pakistan will lose in that bargain. But so ultimately, I think the solution in Afghanistan still lies in Pakistan, because Pakistan is holding the strings, and we need to pressurize that country. That is a terrorist country. The threat could be placed to Pakistan that if you don't play ball now, we will declare you a terrorist state. And considering the state of Pakistan's economy, considering the state of the internal security situation within Pakistan, I think they may actually reconsider. Okay. Otherwise, we are in for a long haul. There are no short-term solutions. Okay. This is going to be a very, very bitter and long-drawn affair. And in my view, if we don't reach a resolution, come January, February of next year, we are looking into a situation where there will be a civil war. That is the way I have looked at it.
Okay. General Khatouch, I agree with your assessment about Pakistan. And I think the world largely agrees on that, rather than finding solutions here, which are difficult to find as one understands, but they are, hell-bent on being a part of the problem. Leave aside finding a solution. China has given a more nuanced position. They may have, under the influence of Pakistan, not be seen as coming to Delhi, but they've given a nuanced position saying that, look, there were scheduling issues, but we'll be bilaterally in contact, and so they've not dismissed it out of hand. Let's talk about Kabul. Is Kabul listening? Would Kabul be watching intently or closely at what transpired in Delhi today?
Oh, I think Kabul is listening very, very closely, and they have welcomed what has happened. So from the Taliban side, I think the signals are very clear. They are appreciative of what is happening, because they consider that with this happening, the aid will flow in. Now, I'm quite certain the aid will flow in, and it will flow in tremendously. But for that, the Taliban will have to give that very clear signal that it can be distributed by a neutral body, let us say the United Nations mission in Afghanistan. If the United Nations mission in Afghanistan is empowered, then they can actually, the organization is already existing there. So if you have an organization there, and if the aid could be funneled through them to all sections of society, then the immediate threat of starvation, at least that can be addressed.
Okay.
So on the first step, I think we should go in for that.
Okay. On the humanitarian assistance, yes. But General Khatouch, let me then ask you, you say Afghanistan or Kabul is listening intently and watching intently what transpires in Delhi. But the fact remains that when 8 major powers of the world were converging to talk about Afghanistan, Pindi called in the foreign minister of Afghanistan, Amir Khan Motaki. He was in Islamabad today, and when everyone knows it's not Islamabad that he's visiting, it's really Rawalpindi that he's visiting. So the question can be asked that does Kabul care?
Well, you see, Kabul has got its own set of challenges. As I said, the Taliban is facing challenges from 2 quarters. One is they will, the pressure which is being put on them by the Pakistan military. Now, I would like to make it very clear, especially to all your viewers, that even in the first rule of Taliban from 1995 to 2001, the 6 years where they ruled,
Yes.
During that period, there were at any one time 10 to 20,000 Pakistani military personnel and administrative personnel in Afghanistan. Now that was the sort of interference Pakistan was doing then. In my view, that interference has increased many-fold now. So there is a very huge influence of the Pakistan military and their administrative setup in Afghanistan. I don't know how the Taliban will be able to handle that, should they wish to. The second aspect is the Islamic State. Now, while both the Islamic State and the Afghan Taliban together fought the Afghan government, which was supported by the Americans, but now that the Americans have gone, the Islamic State has got a slightly different ideology. They do not want to compromise at all with their core ideology, which is much more hardline than the Afghan Taliban ideology. And the problem as far as the Afghan Taliban government is concerned, if they actually start compromising with the regional powers and with the West, then a large number of their supporters, as I said earlier, will now migrate to the Islamic State. So either way, I think they are hemmed in. And it is going to be very difficult for the Afghan Taliban to come out of this particular situation, which is what leads me to my basic premise. I think the country will head towards civil war.
But sir, this is for the viewers. That is, when the Taliban was a ragtag militia being controlled by the Quetta Shura, one could understand the influence of the Haqqani madrasas and by proxy the GHQ Rawalpindi. But now they are the rulers of Afghanistan. They are the government. We can debate till the cows come home whether legitimate or not, but they are the government of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. So do they really need to, don't they need to break out of the stranglehold of Pakistan, and also in a nuanced way, do they listen or get dictated by Pindi?
I don't think the Haqqanis are going to break with Pindi as of now. It doesn't appear likely to me. So within the Taliban itself, perhaps there could be a split, which is why, the more the splittism takes place, and there are various terrorist groups now. Now, basically, the Taliban is not in a position to take action against any terrorist group there. That is a given. So if they cannot take action within the terrorist groups which are there, they would like to make peace with them. And one of the conditions to make peace with them will be to continue with a radical ideology. Now, I think they are hemmed in. So, and for Pakistan, it suits their purpose admirably. You keep Afghanistan on the boil, and you can control Afghanistan. So, in a sense, it is not Taliban which is ruling Afghanistan. It is Pakistan which is ruling Afghanistan.
By
and
proxy.
this takes care of what they have been planning for a very long time. Their strategic depth. Their strategic depth philosophy was to create an Islamic Emirate which included Pakistan and Afghanistan. Later on, it added on the 5 Central Asian republics, and later even added on Iran. Now that has been Pakistan's dream. So they have come to the first step of their dream, by which they have got Afghanistan under their control. How long they can keep it, that is of course the question. But there are no easy solutions. And despite what has happened today, where all the NSAs of the 5 Central Asian countries, Iran, Russia and India, all 8 have got together with a joint declaration which is absolutely unambiguous. It is very rare to get a declaration which is so clear as which has been issued. But despite that, I think there is going to be huge problems ahead, and the country is still liable to slip into civil war.
General Katoch, your final comments. I agree with you, there are no easy solutions to the quagmire that Afghanistan is in. But, has that narrative been demolished which Pakistan was trying to build up, saying, well, India has been decimated, now we control Afghanistan, when 8 of the regional powers, as you say, of different blocs gather in New Delhi, concur with New Delhi, and they all speak in one voice. Even Pakistan, who thinks or has considerable influence on the Afghan government, is that narrative demolished at least?
President Palji, I think Pakistan has misled the narrative right from the beginning. Even at that point of time, on the 15th of August, when the Taliban took over, I made a statement at that time. I said the Taliban hasn't won the war. I made it very clear. I said the war has now started. So that was the beginning of the war, not the end of the war. And if Pakistan thinks that was the end of the war and they won victory, I think that is misplaced. Ultimately, in this entire Afghanistan game, when we play it out over a period of 3 to 5 years, it is the Pakistan which will be the biggest losers, because the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP with which Pakistan is now trying to make peace, whose prisoners they have started releasing, is not going to make a difference. These groups work on ideology, and they are so fanatically oriented towards that ideology, they are not going to change. So Pakistan is going to bear that brunt later, and they are going to pay a very, very heavy price. Recently, what they thought they had won, because at that time, Russia, the 5 Central Asian republics, and Iran were delighted that the Americans have left. But now, I think everybody is having a second thought, because it was America which was putting the money in to keep stability, stability in the region. And now with them coming out, that financing has to be done by somebody else. And despite the fact that China has a border with Afghanistan, they have not stepped in. Now that indicates their dilemma. So I think it's going to be, for Pakistan, no. The scenario has changed. I think it is going to change even more rapidly. And the coming months, the next 2 months itself, will determine how far the dialogue has changed, the narrative has changed, and then Pakistan will be screaming for peace, but
Absolutely.
I don't think they will get it.
So much for their understanding of strategic depth. What they might call strategic, at most maybe a tactical victory for the time being. General Dhruv Katoch, many thanks for joining us and sharing your insights with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And moving on, President Ramnath Kovind conferred the honorary rank of General of the Indian Army to Nepal Army Chief General Prabhu Ram Sharma. Union Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, Army Chief M.M. Naravane, Air Chief Marshal V.R. Chaudhary and Navy Chief Admiral Karambir Singh, besides CDS General Bipin Rawat, attended the ceremony. General Sharma, who is an alumnus of the National Defence College in India, also holds an M.Phil degree in Defence and Strategic Studies from the University of Madras. He is currently on a 4-day visit to India. Earlier last year, the Indian Army Chief General M.M. Naravane too was conferred the honorary rank of the General of the Nepali Army by the President of Nepal, Bidya Devi Bhandari. And the tradition of conferring the rank of honorary general to the chiefs of armies of Nepal and India started in 1950, with General K.M. Cariappa being the first Indian Army chief to be decorated with the highest army title of Nepal. It reflects the continued bonhomie between Indian and Nepalese armies and the deep trust and understanding between the two nations. And let's now take a look at updates on COVID-19 from across the world. Well, the world recorded more than 25 crore 15 lakh cases of COVID-19. The number of recoveries from COVID-19 worldwide has crossed 22 crore 77 lakh, while the virus has claimed over 50 lakh 79,000 lives so far. The U.S. continues to remain the worst affected with COVID-19, where the number of cases stand above 4 crore 75 lakh. The country has lost more than 7 lakh 78,000 lives to the disease so far. French President Emmanuel Macron said on Tuesday that those aged over 65 will need to present a proof of COVID-19 booster shot from mid-December for health passes that give access to restaurants, trains and planes to remain valid. The third shot, so far available only for people older than 65 and the vulnerable, will from early December also be available for the 50 to 64 age group, Macron said in a televised address. The health pass is required to enter restaurants and bars, to go to the gym or a conference, and for long-distance train and plane journeys. Macron said that Europe was seeing a fifth wave of coronavirus infections and that in France there had been an alarming rise in the number of COVID-19 hospital patients and spread in the number of cases. France registered 12,476 new confirmed infections on Tuesday, the highest level since September 8th. That's what the Health Ministry data showed. And health workers in England will have to be vaccinated against COVID-19 by April 1st next year. This is what UK's Health Minister Sajid Javid said on Tuesday, making it mandatory condition for employment for those on the front line of the National Health Service. The move sees England follow the likes of France, Italy and some US states in ordering healthcare workers to get vaccinated. Javed said that there would be exemptions for compulsory vaccinations for people who can't get vaccinated for medical reasons and for those who don't have face-to-face contact with the patients. The move follows a similar decision to make COVID-19 vaccines compulsory for home care workers, which comes into force on Thursday. The Australian government agency on Tuesday said that 13 senior members of the former US government this thing said that former President Donald Trump's administration violated a law that limits political campaigning by government employees, faulting them for creating a taxpayer-funded campaign apparatus within the White House. In a 65-page report, the U.S. Office of Special Counsel identified instances in which U.S. Trump advisors, including Jared Kushner and Kellyanne Conway, used their official position or authority to promote Trump's 2020 presidential election campaign. Meanwhile, a federal judge ruled on Tuesday that a U.S. House of Representatives committee investigating the deadly January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol can access former President Donald Trump's White House records in a win for congressional investigators. U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan in the District of Columbia rejected an argument by Trump's lawyers that telephone records, visitor logs and other White House documents should be hidden from the committee. Trump's supporters had stormed the Capitol in a failed bid to prevent Congress from formally certifying now President Joe Biden's election victory. Biden, a Democrat, took office on the 20th of January. Around 700 people face criminal charges stemming from that riot. The European Union has pledged a package of $115 million to the United Nations Adaptation Fund. The UN Adaptation Fund offers finance to developing countries vulnerable to the impact of climate change. The additional contribution from EU budget is by far the biggest pledge for Adaptation Fund made by donors at COP26.
Addressing the effects of the crisis that we are already in. Today is the day we need to act on adaptation as well. Financing adaptation is critical. We all repeated that mantra endlessly, but the rhetoric, sadly, is not followed by action. We all need to get cracking, and we all need to do it now. That is why the European Commission will contribute 100 million euros to the Adaptation Fund, because those who need resources for adaptation also need to have predictability and clarity about its delivery.
A cold wave swept across many parts of China over the last few days, bringing heavy snowfall and plunging temperatures. Strong winds and heavy snow have hit several parts of northern China early this year, damaging houses and blocking roads. The highest warning signal has been issued in multiple cities as snowfall broke local records in various areas. Large parts of the country, including Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei and Inner Mongolia experienced this winter's first significant snowfall and rain on Saturday, according to the China Meteorological Administration. The 2022 Winter Olympic Games will take place a few months from now in Beijing, a city which is generally considered having dry weather with less snow and rain in early winters. But an incoming storm could bring a potentially significant snowfall to the region with less than 100 days to go for the Games. And time now for news from across the world.
A An impeachment process against Chilean President Sebastián Piñera over allegations of irregularities in the sale of a mining firm will advance to the Senate after being approved by a majority of deputies in the lower chamber. After almost 22 hours of debate, the vote to proceed passed with a minimum 78 votes needed versus 67 against and 3 abstentions. In the Senate, it would require a higher threshold of the vote at 2/3 of the 43 senators. The impeachment proceedings against Piñera come after new details emerged about the deal in the Pandora Papers leak, a huge cache of documents that revealed offshore transactions involving global political and business figures. Among them were documents that appear to outline a deal involving the 2010 sale of the Dominga mine, a sprawling copper and iron project in Chile. At the same time, Piñera, a billionaire businessman, was in his first year of his first term in office. The leak stirred controversy in Chile because it suggested the deal, which involved a firm linked to Piñera's family, was contingent on a favorable regulatory environment. The sale had previously been examined and dismissed by courts in the year 2017. The United Nations said at least 16 of its staff and dependents in Ethiopia have been detained in the capital, Addis Ababa. UN spokesperson said that it is working closely in the war-torn country to get its staff released immediately. The state-appointed Ethiopian Human Rights Commission said it had received many reports of arrest of Tigrayans in the capital, including elders and mothers with children. However, police have denied making ethnically motivated arrests, saying they are only targeting supporters of the rebellious Tigrayan forces fighting the central government. Meanwhile, the fighters of Tigray's People's Liberation Front and the Oromo Liberation Army was seen in the town of Kimaisi, that is situated 200 miles away from the Ethiopian capital. Ethiopia had announced a state of emergency for 6 months on 2nd of November as Tigrayan forces threatened to capture the Addis Ababa. Conflict unfolded in Ethiopia in November 2020 when forces loyal to the TPLF seized military bases in Tigray. In response, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed sent troops to the northern region. Thousands have been killed and more than 2 million have fled to their homes in fighting since then. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said that Australia's pathway to zero emissions by 2050 will be driven by Australians' choices as the government announced plans to boost infrastructure supporting electric vehicles. The Australian government said it will commit $132 million in new funding to ramp up the rollout of hydrogen refueling and charging stations for electric vehicles weeks after adopting a net zero emissions target by 2050. The strategy will help lower emissions by over 8 million tons of carbon emissions by the year 2035, put 1.7 million electric vehicles on the roads by the year 2030, and avoid $166 million of electricity network upgrade costs. A pregnant Yemeni journalist was killed in a car explosion in Aden on Tuesday, witnesses and medical sources said, in the latest incident of violence in Yemen's southern port city. Initial investigations indicated an explosive device was planted on the vehicle carrying Rasha Abdullah Al-Hasari and her husband Mahmoud Al-Atmi, also a journalist. Al-Atmi was injured, said the two medical sources at Al-Jamhuriya Hospital. They also said that Al-Hasari was pregnant. Hundreds of migrants shivered in freezing temperatures and huddled round campfires on the Belarusian borders with Poland on Tuesday, with front of razor wire fences and lines of Polish border guards blocking their entry into the European Union. The European Commission said Belarus was illegally offering migrants easy entrance into the EU via its territory. Around 2,000 migrants have gathered at the border and are trying to enter the EU, the Commission said, adding that the bloc was ready to assess Poland at short notice if asked. Protesters took to the street in Aghareb town in sparks as a dispute over the reopening of a landfill was responded by one of the biggest street demonstrations to hit Tunisia since July power grab by its president. Tunisian police used tear gas on Sunday evening to disperse a group of demonstrators gathered in Aghareb to protest the Environment Ministry's decision to reopen the El Guana landfill. In Sri Lanka, at least 12 people killed as heavy rainfall and flash floods wrought havoc in the country. Vehicles were seen driving through flooded streets in Puttalam and in the capital Colombo. The meteorological department predicted that the rain will ease in the next 2 days, but stressed people should remain vigilant. The weather department also said the country may witness strong winds and lightning. In Spain, a drone footage released by local government of La Palma showcased lava streams from Cumbre Vieja volcano reaching Los Guiris beach after falling from a cliff. Authorities said it was unclear whether the recent lava stream on the bench was going to create a new delta of lava or would it join the existing one. Local authorities said seismicity and the emission of sulfur dioxide from the volcano continue their downward trend. World Today Desk, DD India.
And the Indian squad for the upcoming three-match 2020 series against New Zealand was announced on Tuesday, and Rohit Sharma has been named captain of the team. KL Rahul has been appointed vice captain of the 16-member squad. However, the team will be without the likes of stars Virat Kohli, Jasprit Bumrah, Mohammad Shami, Hardik Pandya and Ravindra Jadeja, who have been rested for the 2020 internationals. A significant re-entry is of Yuzvendra Chahal after being left out of the 2020 World Cup squad. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Malala Yousafzai announced her wedding to Asir Malik. Sharing photos of the ceremony on social media, she wrote, "Asir and I tied the knot to be partners for life." The Pakistani activist got married in Birmingham. And news just coming in, the US has become the 101st member country of the International Solar Alliance. Now that's a big development. The United States has joined the International Solar Alliance, an initiative led by India and France. It was after the Paris agreement on the COP meeting at Paris that the Solar Alliance was formed, and India took an initiative towards it. And John Kerry, the US Special Envoy for Climate, announced this at COP26 that it will be a big boost to accelerate global adoption of solar energy. US becoming the member country, the 101st member country of the International Solar Alliance. So it will lead to more adaptation of solar energy globally. With this, this is an important development which was announced by John Kerry at the ongoing COP26 at Glasgow. And by joining this conference, now it becomes the 101st member of the International Solar Alliance. And the US Special Representative for the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate announced this at the UNFCCC COP26 today, that US has joined the International Solar Alliance. It is the 101st country to sign this a framework agreement of the International Solar Alliance to catalyze global energy transition through solar-led approach. Signing the framework agreement, John Kerry said that it has long been coming, and we are happy to join the International Solar Alliance, which Prime Minister Modi took lead in making. This is what John Kerry had to say at COP26. He said, "We worked out the details, and this is a process we are pleased to be part of. This will be an important contribution to more rapid deployment of solar globally. It will be particularly important for defense for developing countries." Well, Cabinet Minister Environment and Forest Bhupinder Yadav has welcomed this move of the US joining the International Solar Alliance. And that's it then in World Today. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.